Chapter 11. When you hear the sound of a kitty. I spent the first flight to Salt Lake City hungry, but at least I was warm. I knew I needed good luck when the plane landed at the next airport. I hoped the arrival gate was close to my next boarding gate. The departure time of my next flight out of Utah was only 15 minutes after touchdown of the flight I was on. I stood anxious as I waited to get off the plane. The minutes ticked away as I couldn't progress my situation until I stepped off the airplane. I finally stepped into the terminal, and I checked the map to see where my connecting flight was boarding. I had 15 minutes, and my flight was on the opposite side of the airport. I ran. I dodged people and anything else in my way. I made it to the gate as the doors were closing. An airline employee held the door when she saw me approaching. I walked quickly down the ramp and into the aircraft. I reached my seat and sat down. I was out of breath and pouring sweat. I walked from the ramp and into the Kalispell airport. The vibe of the building was rustic. I first saw Madison through the glass of the doors as I walked to the front of the outdated airport terminal. We smiled at each other. Madison and I then did as we discussed prior. The two of us pretended to act out a scene like in a movie. We ran in slow motion towards each other and embraced. We kissed like the actors who pretended to have been apart for so long. I told Madison I had always wanted to do that. It was a bucket list ridiculous item. It was then a new memory. I threw my bag in Madison's SUV. We both got in. We made eye contact and Madison pulled off into the Montana night. Something about that look in Madison's eyes before she began to drive us to her house. As Madison and I traversed the night, she pointed out places and buildings in her city which held significance in her life. The post office where she worked after she left the military, the bar where she sang karaoke, the streets and businesses which shaped and influenced her life during the 26 years she lived there, the school she attended as a child, the details of her life in Montana. That night, Madison came to bed with me in the spare bedroom at her house. We kissed and felt each other for over an hour. Madison and I reached a point just short of intercourse. Madison eventually excused herself to go to sleep in her bedroom. She told me to get some rest. She had plans for our first upcoming date together. We were up early that next morning. We went and ate breakfast at a diner in town. Madison then took me to Glacier and took me to Whitefish. I loved everything we saw. The mountains, the sky, the water, the whole experience seemed surreal. It was the last day of January 2019. I left a Midwest winter, which was so cold it was dangerous. It was 40 degrees in Montana that day. The two of us wore hooded sweatshirts as Madison took me to some of the most beautiful scenic locations I had ever visited. It took 3 stops that day for me to find a Western Union to receive $500. I then had money again. I felt it would be enough to get through until my online money card cleared and was active. Though I didn't have my debit card with me, I had received a card from my other account days prior to the trip. It was only coincidence that I had done the requirements to start its activation just 2 days prior. Madison took me to a grocery store that evening. Her mom was coming to eat dinner with us. We picked up the items to cook and we headed through the beautiful Montana landscape back to Madison's house. After Madison's mother left that night, we shared a repeat of the night before. Again, Madison retired to her room, just short of intercourse. I didn't mind at all. It was never about sexual consummation. Anytime I hooked up with anyone, it was always about the connection we shared. That intimacy between Madison and me concluded the first full day of the 2 weeks I was to spend in Montana. News from the east was of no end to the bitter cold. It felt like spring to me in Montana. I slept well that night, knowing I had more ahead to experience. Before I drifted off to sleep, my mind flashed back to that moment my eyes caught Madison's eyes as we pulled away from the airport. Something about the look in her eyes in that moment. Madison's passion was singing. She had a favorite location for karaoke. It was a large square building on the outskirts of Kalispell. The two of us passed it on the way to Madison's house early in the day. Do you want to go there later? We can meet some of my friends. I'll sing for you. Sure, I'm good with whatever. The big sky was dark when we pulled into the bar's parking lot. We walked inside and I was surprised by the number of people inside a bar in Montana in the middle of the week. For some reason, I wasn't surprised at the taxidermized polar bear behind glass along an interior wall of the building. I could see that I was in Madison's world. Madison lit up as soon as she was inside the building. She knew everyone. 2 tables of her closest friends sat around talking about what songs they were going to sing that night. Madison made her way to all sections of seating to say hello to people. People came up to her and requested songs for her to sing. She introduced me to people all around the bar. I smiled, seeing she was in her element. The DJ announced Madison's arrival on the microphone when he saw her. I sat with her and her friends. They drank. I didn't. Madison sang a few times as she rotated turns with her friends. I watched her performances and clapped for her. Then suddenly, I was alone. As the night went on, I stayed in the main seating area by the stage. Groups of people sat or congregated in haphazard locations throughout the establishment. A couple of hours passed by without seeing Madison. I looked for her. I asked her friends. They told me she was with other friends in another spot in the bar. I checked to see if Madison's car was still there. It was. I ran into Madison and 2 of her friends as I walked back inside. She apologized and told me she was in a conversation of importance. She said it would not be much longer. I went to the restroom in the bar. I then went to sit in Madison's car in the parking lot. I wasn't mad or annoyed. I was just more comfortable in the seat of a car than a chair in a bar by myself. Madison jumped in her car about 20 minutes later. She began apologizing profusely. She then asked me a question I didn't see coming. If we stop by and got your bags, can I drop you off at the airport? What? My flight isn't for almost 2 weeks. Madison and I talked as we sat in the car in the bar parking lot. There was a guy Madison had known her whole life. Between the time Madison and I first interacted on the website and when she picked me up from the airport, she and the guy had become something of an item. She told me they had always had crushes on each other, and they both had learned that information about each other just recently. I'm so sorry, I didn't plan for this. I get it, but it puts me in a predicament. I saw a look in your eyes when we pulled away from the airport. Was that it? Yeah, I've been talking it out with him all night tonight. That's why I disappeared. Madison and I spent the next day together. She took me to her favorite restaurant for lunch. We watched a couple of movies. She gave me her bed to sleep in that night. She took the guest room. The next morning, I checked my online cash card. It was active. I booked a hotel for the rest of my time in Montana. Madison took me to an ice cream shop. She then took me to a grocery store so I could shop for food for my hotel stay. When we reached the hotel, she put the security deposit on her credit card. My cash card wasn't accepted for that part of my stay. I had a week and a half to spend in that hotel in Kalispell, Montana. I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't know the area, and all my friends and connections were elsewhere. I hadn't done any drugs those days I was at Madison's house. Those days were the longest I had gone without drugs since I first began using crystal in early 2017, almost 2 years earlier. I wasn't at Madison's house anymore. I was on my own. And I did happen to have a 1/4 ounce of crystal with me. It was a 1/4 ounce I had brought with me through airport security in my pocket. It went through the conveyor belt x-rays and all checkpoints. I figured out a way to carry it with me and not get caught. Once I was alone in my new hotel room, I set up and prepared to get high. I had been so consistently on crystal that I was sure I still had plenty in my system. Despite not having a clean slate, I knew I was going to get extra zooted after taking that short break. I sniffed my first line. It was 1/2 gram. The burn subsided and I was flying high in that hotel room. At one point, I accidentally dumped 2 grams of powder on the hotel carpet. I rubbed it in with my foot. I wasn't about to do hotel floor drugs. I still had 5 more grams. I would make do with what wasn't rubbed into the floor. I was on overdrive with my online interactions. I knew I was trapped at that hotel, but I embraced physical isolation. I had 3 visitors during my hotel stay. I had many new online partners keeping me company at that hotel. I had even met a lady from Atlanta who shared the first draft of her memoir with me for critique and edit. Though it was winter in Montana, the weather was mild. I found a Mexican restaurant within walking distance in the snow. Mexican food had always been my favorite. I ate at that restaurant 2 or 3 times a day. I also found a thrift store in the general area. On a few afternoons, I visited the store. My last morning in the hotel began stressfully. I woke to news alerts all over my phone. There was a terrible winter storm working its way across most of the country. My flight was in the late evening. The storm was building momentum by the hour. Minneapolis was to be my layover that day. I was originally scheduled to fly into the Minneapolis airport and then fly on to Detroit. Minneapolis was one of the first major airports which shut down that day due to the storm. That began a long back and forth phone battle with my airline. As I figured, I wasn't the only person that day trying to sort out my flight schedule. As soon as I thought I was set with a new return route, as soon as I felt relief, the next airport would shut down. I would hop on the phone again to start the process all over. I would receive emails, updates every few minutes from the airline. I could hardly keep up. Your flight has been canceled. Your new flight will be at this time going to Atlanta. Your flight has been canceled. Your new flight will be at this time going to Chicago. Your flight has been canceled. Your new flight will be at this time going to Dulles. Your flight has been canceled. It just kept going. Hotel management let me stay throughout the day as I tried to get together some semblance of concrete flight plans. By dinner time, I convinced the airline to concede to an idea I formulated. The airline rescheduled my flight for the half-dozenth time. That flight had a connection in Tampa, Florida. From there was no connecting flight. The Detroit airport had shut down as well. After much talk and negotiation, after being transferred to other customer service reps and their supervisors, I was set up with a plan that made me happy. It was time to leave the hotel. I left the hotel with a ride service that evening. The car dropped me off in front of the Kalispell airport. The snow was falling hard. The sun was almost gone. I then had a couple of hours to wait and hope my outbound flight didn't get grounded. I had finally taken some solace in my current situation. I was headed to Tampa. I was on my way to see Brian. The airline worker told me that I could catch the second leg of my flight 3 days later. I would be able to spend those days warm in Florida. I would be able to spend the time with a best friend I had known since I was 14. Brian was the first person I had done drugs with almost a quarter century prior. We took some paper acid during our first year in high school. We split our time that night between an outdoor party in the woods on an island in the Maumee River and a house party at a friend's house a mile away in the Fort Meigs neighborhood of Perrysburg. We were high school freshmen. We had just opened the doors to a new world of drugs. Our journey had begun. 5 years later, I lived with Brian in Fairborn, Ohio. For a year, as Brian went to college, I grew weed in our apartment in the Dayton suburbs. It was the one time in my life I didn't live in the immediate Toledo, Ohio area. Brian and I were well versed in almost all of the drug scenes at that point. Brian and his brother had moved south in the early 2000s. Each year, I always went to visit. Charlotte, North Carolina was where they lived for years. They then moved to Florida. I continued to make trips. Girlfriends came with me. I always loved my time with both brothers. They were 2 of my closest friends. It had been a year since Brian found his brother dead in their shared home. I knew Florida had been hard for Brian since then. I'd gone to see him multiple times in 2018. Each time, I had been closer to convincing him to come back up to Ohio. This time, I hoped to succeed. When I arrived on the plane in Tampa, I took in the warm weather. I texted Brian to let him know I was at the airport. He didn't reply. I spent the next couple hours wandering around the airport and eating food at restaurants. Finally, my phone call woke Brian up. He told me to meet him. I flagged down a taxi and told the driver my destination. I was going to a storage yard in Clearwater. Brian told me he would be waiting for me there.